this effort. So very quickly, want to introduce our data governance educational series. This is the first of 3. We will also, on August 16th at 11 Mountain Standard Time, have part 2, which is combating executive attention span disorder, which is kind of a fun play on keeping executive sponsorship engaged. And then on August 30th, also at 11 Mountain Standard Time, our 3 of 3 heading off the analytics zombie apocalypse will be taking place. So hopefully you can join us for those as well. If not, we are recording all of these data governance series, and so we will be sure to share that link out in case you want to share it with your colleagues and whatnot. So let's go ahead and get started. Next slide, please. Want to introduce your speaker today. Of course, Deborah Langer, I'm your host, but your keynote speaker for today is Mr. Grant Sutton. He is our data governance practice lead and brings over 20 years of experience in data governance in all types of environments, from mid-market to your very large enterprise. So he's seen a lot, he knows a lot, and he's developed the practice based off of those learnings. Next slide, please. Very quickly wanted to share a little bit of information about data source consulting and what we do. We are a company that focuses exclusively on enterprise data management, data warehousing, and business intelligence. And we do that by providing both strategic as well as implementation services. It's something we, like the last sentence there, we're very passionate about what we do. And we do a lot of volunteer work and sit on boards as part of that in our off time. So under strategic, some of the services that we provide are data governance assessments, right, that address people, process, and technology. And we have some very short in duration, quick starts for data governance, as well as full-fledged implementation, and then we hope that we move you into business as usual, where it's no longer called data governance, it's just something that you do as part of your day-to-day business. We do roadmaps and assessments for BI, data warehousing, and enterprise data management, provide project plans, program management, and vendor tool selection. And then under implementation, those are our doers, right? The people that actually go in and help execute and integrate and work collaboratively with your internal team to deliver. And so that includes data architecture, data integration, data quality, test data management, master data management, reporting and analytics, cloud, business intelligence. So a plethora of different services that we provide. Next slide, please. So would like to introduce Grant Sutton. I'm going to pass the baton over to him. He will take you through today's agenda. And then just want to give you a little bit of logistics. The presentation is about 35, 40 minutes. We'll go through it a little bit quicker than we had anticipated just to offset the technical difficulties. And then at the end, we will take your questions. And you can submit those. There's a question box. So feel free at any time to type in your questions. And we'll save time at the end because that's really the good stuff, the dynamic conversation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Grant.
Thank you so much, Deborah. I appreciate that. And just in case you were wondering, Deborah was the better looking one on that slide that had both of our faces on it. So just wanted to, like Deborah said, we'll go through this pretty quickly because of the later start. Plus, as she said, really you getting to be able to ask and get answers to your questions is very important to us. So we'll, if it seems like I'm flying through at some point, just make a note, send a question, and of course we're happy to follow up with you later. So we really want to, based on experience, want to talk about some kind of 4 key things that you can do to sell data governance in a strategic world. Or sorry, in a tactical world. Messaging for success, having a sales team strategy, that team being very important, surfing to sell, we'll talk about what that means in a bit, and then finally, that dream state we all look forward to of dealing with our stakeholders who are begging and pleading for more from us. So with that, we'll get started here. I'm not sure why that is working. There we go. So oftentimes, and it can be enterprise data governance or any enterprise data initiative we undertake, it can be hard to win support for that. There's kind of this paradox I've seen over the years, and many other people, when I talk about it, nod their heads and agree. Kind of the infrastructure paradox. If the more people who are going to benefit from a particular effort, the harder it seems to get to sponsor it. Everyone else thinks, whether it's just basic network infrastructure or the phone system, whatever it is, why should they have to participate or pay in that since everybody benefits? So it can be very hard to do that. But especially when we measure implementation with a calendar, but our sponsors, especially these days, more and more, use a stopwatch. And as we do that, we kind of need to think about bridling our enterprise data nerd tendencies. And I say that with great pride as an enterprise data nerd myself. But and realize the different way that our potential sponsors may be looking at this program that we're trying to do. We're going to, we tend to talk in terms of enterprise solution, and it's true. It is going to benefit a lot of people, and data is that lifeblood flowing throughout the organization, and so everyone's going to benefit if we do our job right. But that actually, again, going back to that paradox, can actually work against us. Our potential sponsors tend to think in terms of a specific problem that they are having. We will tend, because we're good problem solvers and really want to solve the problem and not just treat symptoms, we'll be talking about root causes and how we're getting to, really solve this is a great solution and not just a treatment. Whereas, frankly, a lot of our people who are potential sponsors, their vested interest is not necessarily in solving that problem. They want the symptoms treated. They're on a shorter time frame. Their performance is getting measured by the quarter or by the month or whatever, and they are perfectly okay with symptoms being alleviated. Since you are going to be alleviating symptoms as you address the root causes, it's okay to talk about that in terms of that with them, and that will resonate more with them. We'll tend to talk about architecture principles. And again, our potential sponsors tend to be focused on a specific solution. It's very, we can talk very, nicely about all the things we're going to do and how we're going to have, how the metadata in our data governance strategy is going to work and how that's going to work out. And they want a solution to the particular problems they are having. We feel, we sometimes feel like cost pressure and are hesitant to bring up things that, are going to cost our organization money, whereas oftentimes, we miss the mark. Sometimes our potential business sponsors are really more focused on a deadline, and they have the resources available to spend on something, but in their real pressure is time pressure. So they want to know how, what can you do for me this quarter, this year, and in the next quarter. So we need to just remember that as we come at this as enterprise data nerds, we need to be thinking about the different perspective that our potential sponsors could have. And as Deborah alluded to in the next webinar in the series, does cover this in more detail, so I won't go into it much here. Suffice it to say that, because we're dealing at an enterprise level, we tend to look up higher in the organization for a sponsor, someone who covers things at an enterprise level. The thing is, those folks tend to have a lot on their mind, and the attention spans aren't always terribly long. And we'll talk again in the next webinar about how to deal with that executive attention span disorder and how to, work around that and inoculate yourself against it. So again, tune in next week if you have more deeper questions about that. So here we are. We're told, hey, you got this strategic initiative of data governance that you're trying to implement. You're trying to develop a critical capability for the organization. And so we hear things like, well, but you got to deliver quickly and deliver iteratively to show incremental value. Go after the low-hanging fruit and get some quick wins under your belt. those are all, that none of that is bad advice, but that is not what this presentation is about. This is about more the longer-term sell, and so that you can have ongoing support for your governance initiative. So, sorry, that's what I was just saying. This is about winning approach for selling your program. Now, some of you may be on this call say, well, I have executive sponsorship, so I think, I don't think this is an issue. If you do, congratulations. That's wonderful. If you feel you need to have some investment around that, leverage that interest while it's there. Get them to commit to the budget or whatever you need, whether it's staff or tools or whatever it may be. Good luck if you have that executive sponsorship. But be cautious how you wield that hammer. In my experience, if you go around talking to people and saying, you need to get on board because the executive team is looking at this and they're watching you, you can get a lot of passive-aggressive compliance. People know that executive attention span doesn't necessarily last very long, and they can wait you out. But if you go in there and sell them, as we're going to talk about, you can be much more effective long-term. And again, don't expect that executive sponsorship you may have now to last indefinitely, certainly not as long as your program is going to run. So I want to talk about 4 interrelated ideas for selling strategic data governance.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm sorry if somebody needs to maybe mute themselves there. Messaging for success, sales team strategy, surfing to sell, and as mentioned in the agenda, dealing with those stakeholders who want more and more. Again, there's somebody who isn't muted. Could you maybe mute the callers? Okay, in messaging for success, again, back to kind of our natural data nerd perspective, and again, I say that with all the love in the world and recognizing myself as a data nerd. If we start, really trying to get them to understand and share our passion for enterprise data management and data governance, it could be a long uphill battle. If we try to, really make sure, I really want you to understand the difference between data governance and data management, and make sure, before they'll engage with you, you want them to have that base understanding there, and then talking about them, how they're going to participate in defining policies and trying to distinguish between technical and business metadata, and start throwing around terms like, ontologies and taxonomies and how all that's going to work. That's all good, and I'm not saying that isn't part of what we do. I'm saying think about the messaging, and if you want your potential sponsors' eyes to glaze over, definitely proceed along that path. If you want to sell them, you need to be tuning down that language that we use when we talk to each other and get all excited about what we do, and remember that your potential sponsors aren't necessarily coming from that place. So indeed, they're coming at this from different lenses. Perhaps it's common driver for what we do is regulatory risk. The organization in a highly regulated industry is saying, okay, we need the data governance program to avoid non-compliance and to minimize any possible fines, and our from a public relations perspective as well, the things that go along with that. Understand those drivers and speak to them. It may be about data disagreement. I've talked to people long enough to know that these are not unique experiences that we've had. Is that different department, what seems to be a very common scenario, different departments walking into the team to present for the quarterly meeting or whatever, what should be the same number of new customers, for instance, and four departments report 4 different numbers for a number of new customers. That gets old very quick. if that's what's driving the interest in data governance, or that's one of the key drivers, or for your particular stakeholders that you're talking to, be sure you're talking to them in those terms. Understand that's the perspective they're coming from. Becoming more data-driven is a common thing. We hear more and more these days. It's more, very much in the press, and what does it mean to be a data-driven organization? And if that's it, wow, that's great because you have a great story to tell. But make sure you're again understanding their perspective. If you've got different stakeholders, and one of them is focused on data-driven, and the other is maybe you're working with your compliance group as well, and they're more focused on regulatory risk, you're going to have different discussions with those different folks. Try to look at the data issues through their lenses. And again, in the interest of time, we won't cover all these different things, but the other thing, the last thing I'll say on this is that as you look at these are just some examples of different types of perspectives that could involve enterprise data governance. You may be the one who needs to bring this up. If you see the company going through, your company is entering a stage of a lot of acquisitive growth, you may need to be the one who points out the value of data governance and how that plays into that process and is going to make for a better end result. So keep those different perspectives in mind. Sometimes we're so anxious to go tell our story, we forget the most fundamental thing, which is listen. Listen and listen. I've been doing this for a long time, and I have to remind myself of that all the time, because we do get excited about what we do. This is great and challenging work that we're engaged in. But the first step is to listen and understand the challenges that our sponsors and stakeholders are dealing with. Once you know that, align your perspective with theirs. Know the business and the strategy. Know the individual objectives. If you can find out what is on the leader's performance objectives, that's going to go a long way to helping you find something that's going to resonate with them when they see it hitting their wallet. So if you know that one of their objectives that they're going to be bonused on is increasing new customers in a particular demographic or whatever, talk to them about how your data governance program is going to help them with that. If it's reducing the number of compliance issues or non-compliance fees or something like that, make sure you understand that and speak to those. Customize your message. So often, we just go out with a standard deck or, a few slides or a message, and we give the same message to everybody because we're telling it from our perspective. And it's a natural conclusion that if we're going to customize our message to the perspective of our listeners, we're going to have different, slightly different messages. There are going to be some common things, certainly, but in terms of why would you do this and what matters, and the areas of data governance we may highlight are going to differ based on the perspective of the audience we have. No premature initiation. In my experience, too many programs fail because they're excited about it. Because finally, we're doing data governance. You've been waiting for a long time. You're excited about what it can do, and you do a big public launch. And that can sometimes just sink you right there because it's still too conceptual. You don't have successes to point to. You don't have natural business evangelists on board who've been working with you who can help reinforce your message. So while it's an exciting time when that gets approved, be thoughtful and perhaps think about maybe holding off on a bigger public launch of the program. Communication plan. This jives nicely with what we're talking about, needing to address different people and different perspectives. If you don't feel this is a strength of yours, see if you have an internal communications team in your organization. See if they will work with you and help work that out. Oftentimes I've found in companies there are communication channels and means that a lot of people aren't even aware of. And if you have a good group internally, they can help you with that. But make a plan, figure out who you need to communicate to, how often, what the message is, and then live by that plan. And then finally, remember, and sometimes, again, doing this a long time, I tend to forget this too. Repeat, 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 and that fits in with your communication plan. I'm so guilty of finding myself saying, well, I went and met with them last month and explained everything. I don't understand. Why do they not get it? And just remember, expect from the beginning that this message is gonna have to be repeated. People will nod and smile and say thanks so much for the great information. This is really good stuff you're doing. But it doesn't mean it necessarily sank in, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they've absorbed that message to the point where they feel they get it and understand fully how it applies to them, and that they're well and truly sold on it. So as you're thinking about your communication plan and as you're talking with people, don't be afraid to repeat those things, and maybe with a little different twist or whatever, so they don't feel like you're just, didn't you just give this to me last week? But have those follow-throughs and repetitions. Very quickly, I'm going to refer you to Gwen Thomas gave me permission to refer you guys to this. She did an outstanding job of putting together 7 qualities of a winning data governance speech. And I just outlined those 7 steps here, but the link in the presentation, when you get the presentation, it really goes into more detail, and that is, so when you do have our meeting with people and ask, you say, they ask what you're doing, and it's a leader in your organization, you can have that crisp answer and crisp approach that is really going to help you win further support and communicate what it is you're doing very, very effectively. So again, take the time. I recommend it highly. Go take a look at that. And of course, it doesn't apply just to data governance topics. It applies to anything, any kind of elevator pitch you may want to have as you're trying to win support for anything in your organization. So, talked about messaging for success. Let's go on to talk about sales team strategy, emphasis on team. Very quickly, this was something I added before I gave this in the last conference where I talked about this. I was listening to a radio program about why people don't necessarily respond to the data that shows them that something is the right way to do, something the right approach. And some of the examples they talked about in that radio program were that a granny shot, in basketball for a free throw, which is underhanded, both hands underhanded, just, kind of scooping it up, and it's hard to show on a webinar, is more accurate. And but people don't do it. It doesn't look cool. The football owners, again, good solid statistical analysis shows they should trade their first-round picks in the draft for second-round ones. People don't do that. They don't see other people doing it. Football teams who play full, basically don't punt, will win 2 more games per season. Again, solid statistical analysis. It's not enough to have the facts, is the point. People need to see other people doing it. So as you're thinking about, again, we're talking about team here, as you're building a team, you're going to have different people telling potential sponsors from different avenues, from different perspectives, from different parts of the organization, that what you're doing is a good thing to do. The more people you line up getting started doing it, as people can look and see it, they can acknowledge. I haven't yet met anyone who can argue that having accountability for data through stewardship and having a common business language through a business glossary or whatever you want to call it is a good thing. But that doesn't mean they're going to step up and do it. You need to build some broader support there. So the notion that they talked about in this radio program, which was just fascinating, is that people have different people. People are different, have a threshold for change. In other words, how many other people do they need to see doing it before they're willing to get on board? And again, that'll be different. So part of what you're going to want to do is obviously try to find those ones who aren't afraid to stick their neck out and be one of the early adopters. Also, you might find fellow enterprise data governance enthusiasts in unexpected places. And I truly mean to offend no one, and because I think data governance is looked upon this often as well. Often IT is looked on as a necessary evil. But these are business support functions, not typically, not profit centers typically, who are there in the business because they have to be. Legal, regulatory, process improvement team, ethics and compliance. These are just some examples as you see in the graphic there. And, but the interesting thing about these groups is, guess what? Many of them also have an enterprise perspective on data. In other words, they're not interested in just financial data or just operations data or just sales data. They tend to look across the organization, which is the same perspective you have. And guess what? They have stories to tell about the data. Stories that can help you win support for your enterprise data governance program. We talk more about this, building this kind of team in the next webinar as well. So again, build a team, seek out those who are going to support you, whose jobs will be made easier. It's a win-win. You're not asking that you don't have to ask them to be completely altruistic and say, do this because it's right for the organization. You should be able to show them why it's better for them personally. People who will catch that vision and evangelize. We talked about those early adopters who aren't afraid, who don't have to wait for everyone else to be doing it to feel comfortable doing it. Sometimes we say, well, we're enterprise data governance, and sometimes we're afraid to get into a departmental focus. But realize that if you've got a department that's ready to work with you, that can be a good starting point and a good way to illustrate to a broader audience what you can do and make data governance more tangible and real for them. As you have a team, you no longer have to be the best at everything. You can find team members who are better, who are strong in the areas where you're weak, and you can leverage those and work as a team and be stronger overall. Increase the quality of the work you do as you coordinate those teams who are oftentimes looking for the same information, the same data. You can have better outcomes, and you can start to show those again through teams perhaps who aren't viewed, aren't seen as profit centers or as kind of the core operations of the company, but nevertheless can reduce their costs or their need to add staff as the company grows. And then coaching, it's not a bad idea to reach out to folks who've been down this road before and can help you avoid some of the potholes, and use them as maybe a part-time member of your team, or even a full-time member if you're hot and heavy getting started. And then look for that coaching and guidance. Teams have coaches. Surfing to sell. So what do I mean by that? King Canute is actual, king of in the United Kingdom, who used to, his story is told about how he took his throne. His court was very flattering, and told him, "Oh, King Canute, you're so wise and powerful, even the waves would obey you." To make his point, he took his throne down to the beach and commanded the waves to stop and said, "See," not to illustrate his own power, but to illustrate to his court that he was not that powerful. Sometimes we are thinking that, especially if we have executive sponsorship, that we are powerful and we can just make the tidal forces in our organization change. And we can really have a very career-limiting experiences if that's how we approach it. Does data governance require change? Yes. But if we look to surf those waves, especially when we're getting started and looking to sell the value of it to the organization, are we going to surf those waves? Are we going to try to command them to stop? Are we going to try to build seawalls just to try to keep the ocean at bay, which is, probably not going to be a very successful effort? So one of the things we like to do is just work with, find the PMO in your organization or whoever it is that kind of keeps track of manages the project portfolio, and offer them what we call an enterprise data framework. Very high level, subject area perspective on the data across the enterprise. Educate them about it and help them evaluate the incoming requests and initiatives against the enterprise data framework. That is a great way, to actually do some governance work and help, different projects coming from different parts of the organization. And without this framework and mapping, projects to requests to this framework, may never realize the overlap that is there in terms of the data. And so obviously this can help stop perpetuating diverse data as projects go in and implement different systems and things. So it's very powerful, and again we can talk about that more at another time. So people all the time, more often than not, the problem is they're trying to get started with and sell data governance is, oh my gosh, where do we start? There's so much to do. There's, we need help everywhere. And our recommendation is, rather than trying to manufacture a priority from a data governance perspective, look to that prioritized active list of projects that's already been set by the organization. Ride along with those. Find a way where data governance can support that and make it real. Nice thing about that is, instead of adding a project, a data governance project per se, to a list, and guess what, competing for priority against the very stakeholders you're trying to win as supporters. Think about that. You work with them instead, and you both win. And it helps make it real. You're engaged in a project, people can tell, and you're helping them through, whatever means are appropriate, whether it's looking data profiling, data quality, standard business language, getting stewards in line and smoothing the path there. People are going to be able to see that as more real. Finally, dealing with stakeholders to beg and plead for more. I know I'm flying through this, but I want to make sure you guys have time for questions. So congratulations. You're successful, but now you have to deal with the trials of fame and fortune. You got a promotion and a raise. Wise people come to you constantly seeking your counsel. You're universally admired. You're getting offers to star in reality TV shows. The paparazzi are starting to stalk you. And you get this uneasy feeling, and you have to ask yourself, did I begin with the end in mind? Is this going to be able to continue? Is this going to scale? Did I manage expectations? Did I allow them to think that data governance was not a capability, but some sort of program or project that would just be done at a certain point in time? Did I take shortcuts along the way? Did I play it fast and loose with standards? Did I continue to evolve the metrics used to actually measure data governance success? And these questions you see here. So really, this is a way of saying, look ahead. Begin with the end in mind. Realize that this is an ongoing capability that you're providing for your organization, and not a, if you focus too much on just those initial quick wins and think that is what data governance is, you'll be disappointed. You can do those things, but the way you do them is really what's going to determine whether you have long-term success or not. So if you had problems, obviously fix mistakes. Make sure you support your data stewards. Continue to work and evolve your strategy. data governance changes as it matures in the organization. And you need to recognize that and continue to work with your team to evolve how you approach it. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Deborah, who will moderate on any questions you guys may have.
Excellent. Thank you, Grant. Appreciate that presentation. It's very good. I've come up with a couple of questions myself that I hear from being out in the field, questions that I get asked around data governance. And that will allow, a few people to type in their questions into the question section so that we'll give people a little bit of time to get that done. So one of the first questions that I have, and the one that I get asked the most, is should data governance, is it more likely to be successful if it's based out of the business or based out of IT? Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. I can give you the squirrely consulting answer of it depends. But, and I've seen it successful kind of based in either side. And I believe last time I looked at kind of the numbers around that, it was roughly, as far as where the data governance team, the full-time data governance team found its home, was about 50-50 between IT or the business side. That said, in many organizations, there's really a need to drive the message home with the business that this is their data. That, just because once you say data does not mean it's, some people just hold up their hands and say, well, that's IT. They have the databases, they have the data systems, that is IT's deal. In those kind of environments where that message needs to be brought home, that it is the business who has the data and IT, run the systems that store and move that data around, I really recommend putting it on the business side to help make sure that that accountability and responsibility is understood. But in other circumstances, again, part of it depends on what's driving it. It's you may be better off on IT, but at the end of the day, it's going to be unless there's like a horrible perception of IT by the business or something like that, it's not going to make a huge difference what side you're in as long as you have a solid approach.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you so much. We have had a number of questions come in, so let me get through these quickly so that we can get people the answers that they need. One of the first questions that we had, and I'll just answer this one, is will the presentation be shared? Absolutely. We are recording this, and so we will send up a follow-up email with a link to the recording. Second question is, I'm just going to read it verbatim because I want to make sure that I capture it correctly. How to dance the pushing and pushing back balance with the executive sponsors.
How to balance the, pushing and pushing back with the executive sponsors? Okay.
Yeah, how to balance that.
Okay. First of all, the first thing I would say is, and this is not just a clickbait kind of thing, but tune in next week. We really talk about the executive attention span disorder in depth next week and how to work around that and minimize that risk. But the answer I'll give now is if I'm understanding this correctly, and please send a follow-up if I miss it, is if I'm understanding correctly, there's that dance we do, there's that line we walk between pushing for what data governance needs to be in order to succeed, with the perception of maybe an executive or executive team sponsorship may be pushing us to do something that is suboptimal, or usually to do something more quickly and deliver something more quickly to satisfy those tactical needs. Again, selling strategic data governance in a tactical world, which is what we're talking about. And the experiences we've had would lead us to say that the using some of the approaches we've talked about here are very helpful with that. When the executive team is hearing from multiple avenues, they're hearing from legal, from internal audit, and again, not necessarily, those aren't always considered, extremely powerful organizations that drive the direction of the company, but they have a seat at that executive table. And often more and more information security does too, because of recent events. But some of those again, that team, that broader team communicating to them saying, this is what we need to do, can help with that pushback without making you, as a lone champion of data governance in your organization, look like you just don't get business, or you don't get what they're saying, or you're just, worst case, you're just not the right person for the job. So having that team behind you becomes very important, but then also, engage on those projects. Start doing those things so you can show them, they may want to say, I want 2,000 terms defined by the end of the month, and you don't even have data stewards assigned yet. That can be a problem. But if you can show them something else you did and show them when you think you can get to what they're asking for, sometimes sometimes we don't recognize that executive team is trying to stretch us and see what we can do, try to get the most out of us. And if we come back with something reasonable, oftentimes they'll be okay with that. But if we just go off and swallow hard and don't go back and communicate, and then inevitably miss what they asked us to do, that's tough. It's hard to recover from that. But if you do go back and respectfully and with good facts and a plan, cover with them what you can do, oftentimes that's enough. So anyway, like I said, next week we cover more about the executive attention span disorder, go into more depth, but that's what I'd say at this point.
Great, thanks, Grant. 2 more questions. In your experience, what do executives care about the most?
Keeping their job and getting their bonus. I'm sorry if that sounds really cynical, but they are, that is a sweeping statement. I have worked with executives who really deeply care about the people in the company and the future, of the organization. And so, I can't really paint them all with one brush, but even those people who do are maybe a little more caring in that regard, still also care about their performance objectives and what they're going to. That's again why I said it's important to understand what their objectives are, what is driving them. Understand your business strategy and talk to them in those terms, because data governance probably isn't at the top of their list. Data governance is going to be an enabler for things that they want to do, but just do, again, executive attention span disorder next week. We'll talk more about this, but understand what's driving them. What are they, what are they beating up their leadership team about in their monthly meetings or weekly meetings?
Thank you, Grant. Yeah. Thank you. Last question. I just want to make sure that we get all of them in. If they've tried a data governance program and it's failed, then what recommendations do you have for what they should do differently this time?
I run across this a lot, and it's a little disheartening to have people come up and say, we've tried this, not 2, not 3, we've tried this 4 times in the past, and it faded out, or people lost interest, or we never got it off the ground. And part of the answer is, so if the question is what about what we just talked about changes if you've had a past failure, then, I'd say make sure you go and research that. You understand, you talk to the people who are involved if they're still around. And why did it fail? And, learn as much as you can about it. And then part of your message, part of that messaging for success, either you're taking a totally different approach so people don't even recognize that this is very, the same as this previous failed attempt because you're coming at it from a different angle, or you're very upfront and saying, look, this is what went wrong last time and this is how we're going to be different. And unfortunately, more often than not, what we run across is really good people who have a, deep, great understanding of the data in their organizations and what needs to be done about it, but they don't know how to sell it. They don't know how to sell it to the people who hold those purse strings. And so hopefully some of what we've talked about today will help.
Thank you, Grant. And I do want to make sure I get in one last question. I'm sorry, I lied when I said the last one was going to be the last one. What would you say are some of the quick wins in launching a data governance program?
First, the easiest is just get, like I said, surfing the waves. Get involved with those projects that already have support. They're there. Go and have your, figure out what your message is to that project sponsor or the PM or, whoever, and show them why you can reduce the risk and, increase the value of their project. And just get on and then, make them part of your team to help communicate your message. The other one we'll be talking about actually in the third webinar in this series, which is heading off the analytical zombie apocalypse, which should be fun. I'm not a zombie expert, but then that is actually in terms of working with reporting and analytics teams, which is actually another quick win that you can get under your belt.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you so much. Thank you. Next slide. Let me just wrap things up for everybody. We've got one more slide for you. First, let me thank Grant. Thank you so much for your presentation here today. Really appreciate the valuable information and the humorous approach. We look forward to part 2 and part 3. And if you can go to the last slide, for those of you that are local, there are a couple of events here happening in Denver, Colorado in the data space. There is the Informatica user group that's on September 15th. I think that's 12 to 4. And then also there is the TDWI event also the same day, same time, or close to the same time, September 15th, Thursday, and I believe that their event is 1 to 4. So both of those events are coming up. So those of you that are local and are interested, we thought that we would mention some local things happening around town. Okie dokes. Thank you everyone so much for your time today. Hope to see you on part 2. And like I mentioned, this is being recorded and we'll be sure to send this out. So thank you again for all of your attention, and thank you, Grant.
Thank you.